Now, Minister of Tourism Lindiwe Sisulu has told the delegates at the Africa Travel and Tourism Summit that she has had engagements with the British government to discuss South Africa's red listing. South Africa will remain on the United Kingdom's red list after this is in place, leaving in place rather, restrictions for travel between the two countries. Travel between the UK and South Africa has been severely restricted over the past month. Let's talk about the ongoing impact of this. We're joined by the founder of the Health Justice Initiative, Fatima Hassan, and Tshivengwa from the Tourism Business Council. Tshifhiwa, perhaps let me begin with you. As you read it, is there really any legitimate reason for why South Africa is still on the UK's red list?
Well, thank you for having me. We don't believe, from the tourism point of view, there's any legitimate reason why South Africa should remain on the red list. We have the same variant, which is the Delta variant between the two countries. The numbers of infection in South Africa are much lower than the UK. We have presented all this data, and it seems as if the UK is no longer making these decisions based on scientific data. Perhaps it's political or economical. They need to let us know. But from where we sit, we don't believe that there's any reason whatsoever that there should be this red listing of South Africa, and the continuation of it is only devastating to both countries, diplomatically, economically, and other things that we are tied by, including lots of families that live in the UK and South Africa and friends that live in both countries. So they should be able to travel. So we don't believe that there's any logic. We don't believe that it follows any science. And therefore, the UK government has to explain to us what exactly are they following, what made them come to this decision, and why South Africa is left on the red list.
Fatima, if the science does not back this decision up, what else could the UK be basing this decision on?
Thanks, Kathy. So it's unclear to us because South Africa and a number of other countries where a lot of black and brown people live are actually on the red list. So in our view, this is a very racist decision, we believe, and it perpetuates what the UK government has been doing in the last few months, which is, on the one hand, blocking greater access to vaccines for people in Africa, blocking the TRIPS waiver, and at the same time saying to those people that have received a Pfizer vaccine or a Johnson & Johnson vaccine in parts of Africa and in parts of the Middle East or in parts of Latin America, that they won't be considered vaccinated. So, there's a real mismatch, and we believe something quite sinister at play. If not, then I think the British government has to apologize to South Africa as well as all the other countries that have continued to be on the red list, because what you're effectively saying is you're saying to the 15.9 million people that have been vaccinated in South Africa that they are not considered vaccinated for purposes of travel to the UK. But what you're also saying is that 3% of people in Africa who've been fully vaccinated are overnight not regarded as vaccinated. So not only does it fuel vaccine hesitancy and a mistrust in the vaccines that are being used in Africa, but it also just smacks of something we believe more sinister. And as the previous speaker said, the British government has a lot of explaining to do, and we've actually called for an apology from them. Just one last point on the Pfizer vaccine that we're using, which makes this decision even more bizarre and even more strange, is that we are using Pfizer vaccines. You and I have taken a Pfizer vaccine from vaccines given to us from Pfizer directly and vaccines given to us by the U.S. government. So is the British government saying that the vaccines we've got from Pfizer and the vaccines we got as a donation from the U.S. government and the Biden administration are not sufficient for their purposes? That seems rather odd and strange to us.
Fatima, one of the dangers of this conversation is that it brings us back to the vaccines. And when you have a country with the kind of influence that the UK has, now saying, that or casting aspersions on the quality of vaccines, it only worsens the perceptions, especially locally, that already exist around these vaccines. It certainly doesn't make the job of vaccinating more people easier.
Definitely. To say to 15.9 million people in South Africa, and remember, it's not just South Africa, it's the whole of Africa. We have 5.6% of people vaccinated in Africa. It's a very small number. And obviously, we're on a continent which is largely unvaccinated because we can't get sufficient access to supplies, because also of the conduct of the British government in relation to the scaling up of global manufacturing. But effectively, you're telling the 3% of people in Africa fully vaccinated, or the 5.6% of people who are half vaccinated, that their vaccines are not considered to be suitable and appropriate for no good reason. We still haven't seen the scientific reason or data or basis upon which some countries who are using the Pfizer or Johnson vaccine are considered vaccinated, and people who come from our parts of the world are considered unvaccinated. That is the language they're using. It's correct that there is an option to not use the mandatory quarantining hotels that the UK government has been using for the last 2 months, which costs an arm and a leg. But that is, I think, a red herring from the deeper conversation we need to have about, in the middle of a global pandemic, how do you have some countries like the UK, that's part of the G7, making these arbitrary rules? Who do we complain to? What is the level of scrutiny? This is not just a tourism issue. This is a geopolitical issue, which I think links to what we have been calling for the last few months, vaccine apartheid and the vaccine wars that are currently playing out in the world.
Tshifhiwa, let's talk about the tools that are available to South Africa, the mechanisms that are available to South Africa to try and change this decision, and even, as Fatima was saying, get an apology from the UK.
Well, I think that, from our side, we're going to use every tool that we have, because the goal here is to make sure that the UK market is open, just like the German market has opened and many other markets have opened from tourism point of view. So we're going to work with the Minister of Tourism, of course. She's our Minister of International Relations. But I do believe that the President needs to get involved here. A call from the President to the Prime Minister of the UK to demand explanations in terms of what's going on. And also, perhaps from the African Union, because, to just discard, these vaccines or people who are vaccinated from the African continent, I don't think it's something that, needs to be happening. So we need to have this robust, conversation, be it bilaterally or multilaterally, to make sure that we get to a solution. But for us, we cannot wait for the discussions to continue forever. There has to be a relief that comes through as soon as possible. There are many people that are stuck in these two different countries that needs to travel around. It has to be made possible for them to travel around. And also from our side, we lose about 181 million per week, when we don't have the UK market opening. That's 26 million rand every day when South Africa is kept on the red list. And the stringent situation of quarantine is just not attainable. And we've been saying this to the officials, in the UK and elsewhere, to make sure that, we are open for business, we're able to do tourism investments and many other things, safely. And again, this is something that is perplexing to us, because other countries have opened, including Germany. They've looked at our protocols. They look at the scientific data that we have. But we have this one country that sticks out, that still says that, South African, you don't travel to South Africa, even if you're vaccinated. So what's the point then? And that's why, what Fatima was saying in terms of, this whole situation around the vaccines, people start to question. People that are vaccinated should be safe enough to travel from the UK to South Africa and go back home. Same as South Africans that are vaccinated should be able to travel from South Africa to any country in the world and be able to come back home. There shouldn't be any restrictions globally when it comes to this.
Tshifhiwa Tshivengwa is with the Tourism Business Council, and Fatima Hassan is with the Health Justice Initiative Program.